that, let's move forward, keep the ball rolling, and let's hear from some insight from an analyst from IDC. In fact, I'm really pleased to welcome the Vice President of Hosting and Managed Network Services from IDC, Melanie Posey. Melanie?
Thanks a lot. Welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time to come to this presentation. What I'm going to be talking about is providing some context for how the digital economy is running and why you might need some help to get somebody to help you run it. So it's all about infrastructure options for the digital economy. Run your business, not your cloud. So cloud services are at the center of growth right now. IT is all about cloud, and business is all about cloud as well. And the first thing to think about here is that everybody is doing it. We've gotten past the stage of cloud being this new, interesting, exciting thing, and now it's just a basic part of how people do business. And according to IDC's research, 80% of US companies are already in the cloud in some way or another, either jumping in feet first or just dabbling, but they're all there. And they're looking at both public cloud and private cloud. Another thing is that most businesses plan to do more in the cloud. We're seeing humongous growth rates on a year-over-year basis and a compounded basis on how much of IT is going to move to the cloud and how moving to the cloud actually makes more IT necessary as you go forward. And we're expecting to see 34% growth in the next 24 months. And then there's the big number at the end of the row here, and analyst firms like to put up big numbers, so here's your big number. 122 billion being spent on cloud services in 2018. That includes infrastructure, platform as a service, and software as a service. And I've got a couple other statistics here to look at. Looking at developers, what we've got is 90% of new applications are being developed specifically for the cloud. There are very few new applications now being created for what IDC calls the second platform. And another tidbit here is looking at enterprises. And right now, enterprise is moving very rapidly into the cloud. You have very few stragglers in the enterprise space who are saying cloud is not for us. And one thing they're saying is that 29% of them are going cloud for their net new IT resources, which doesn't seem like a huge number, but it is huge when you still have giant enterprise data centers running with a lot of equipment that somebody has to rack and stack inside those data centers. So it's a pretty big number. And then 34% are looking to cloud for replacing or upgrading existing resources. And that's also interesting too, because a lot of enterprise applications are being replatformed, and a lot of enterprises need help with that lift and shift activity. And it's one thing that I'll get to when I talk about service providers. But right now, the interesting thing about service providers is that that's where all the servers are going. That's where the servers are going to live going forward. And we've got 40% of them moving to service provider data centers by 2020, and that's up from 19% right now. So the HPs and the Dells, and also the ODM guys, the service providers are their key customers going forward. And next, we'll take a look at this whole issue of digital disruption. And it's really interesting that I'm following Tinder. That wasn't the original plan in the program, but Tinder is an example of an activity, a business that's gotten digitally disruptive. And I like the idea of calling it social discovery rather than something else, but let's call it social discovery. That's one thing that's been disrupted, and Uber has disrupted how you get from point A to point B, and Airbnb has disrupted where you sleep when you get to point B, and then Tinder can help with who you sleep with when you get there. That's another story. Let me get my train of thought back. I hadn't planned that joke. In the digital economy, industries are getting disrupted, and to avoid being fatally disrupted, what you have to do is engage in continuous innovation and transformation. And one way you do that is on the third platform. So let me just explain what this whole third platform paradigm is all about. The first platform was mainframes. You had a mainframe, you had a terminal. There wasn't a lot of interactive IT going on. There wasn't a lot of end user involvement in the IT that went on. Then you move to the second platform, which is the client-server era, which you started to have a lot more applications, you started to have a lot more flexibility in how IT gets implemented, and a much broader base of usage of IT within the organization. Then we come to the third platform, which in IDC's context, we look at the third platform as the platform for IT-driven business transformation. Now, this idea of IT-driven business transformation, you could also look at it, you can flip it around and say it's business-driven IT transformation at the same time. It's kind of almost the same thing. And the point there is that business and IT are no longer two separate things, that you don't have an IT department and you have a business department. IT is part of business and vice versa. And on this third platform, we got 4 key pillars that hold the whole thing up. And the first one, obviously, is cloud, which is the foundation of all of the innovation that's going on. And then we've got mobility, social business, and big data, analytics, and new ways of doing business intelligence. And we're kind of moving out of this foundation stage now, which we kind of arbitrarily decided will end next year. And when IDC says something is going to end next year, it will end next year. And so we're seeing that people are getting their cloud platforms in place. They're starting to figure out how we use mobility, how we use social business and analytics. And now we're moving into this innovation stage where it's all about, okay, we have these platforms. What are we going to do with them? How are they going to change healthcare, medicine, technology, aviation, and how do you use those technologies to spur innovation within your organization? And recently, we've added another layer to the third platform. The icons that are floating on top of it are what we call enabling technologies, and they're probably too much of an eye chart for you to see right now, but it's things like 3D printing and robotics and natural interfaces, which build on this third platform to create supercharged innovation, where industries change, where you inject personalization, immediacy, social context, all of these other business, marketing, operations factors become embedded into the IT that runs the business. And there are new rules for business in the third platform. And what smart companies leveraging the third platform do is change the way they engage with customers, advance the speed of how products get developed and how they innovate. And at the same time, even though we're talking third platform, we're talking continuous innovation and development, you still have the old school thing to worry about is how reliable are my operations and how resilient are my operations. So then we'll move into this whole idea of the journey to the cloud. Because of the third platform, you have to move to the cloud, but then how do you get there? And this is an analogy I've been using for years now related to laundry. And in a way, IT is like laundry. There are a bunch of different ways to get to the business outcome of laundry, which is clean clothes. So you can do it in-house IT or an in-house private cloud. And since I live in New York City, this option has always been off the table for me. I've never had a washer dryer in my adult life. But some people do. Some people have that. So your traditional IT approach is you go buy the stuff, you install it, you rack it and stack it, then it's there to get your clothes clean. In IT, this has worked for years, obviously, but in the third platform era, you get into a situation where, okay, that washer and dryer looks really old. I would love to have a slick, cool-looking Samsung washer dryer, but I haven't amortized this one yet. So you get stuck in terms of the technology you're using, the sunk cost of that CapEx, the speed at which you can actually innovate, and then the scale. If you have a couple of loads of laundry, you can get it done on that, but if you have more than that, you've got a problem. You've got a scale problem, and you've got a complexity problem, because what if one of the knobs falls off? Then you're walking around wearing dirty clothes. But then the next thing is a laundromat, and I would compare the self-service clouds to laundromats. You get the componentry for building your cloud, and you get the raw resources, but then you have to do your own laundry. And DIY cloud is great for early adopters, but recent IDC research, we found that half of US organizations don't have enough people in their IT department to effectively support cloud. And another 45%, they have the people, but they're not necessarily up on the latest and greatest of cloud to exploit it to maximum effectiveness. And so the third model here is a cloud business platform, which is managed cloud. And that's the equivalent of a laundry service. And that's what I use, because there's a washer dryer in my building, but I've never seen it, so just as well. And the way that the cloud business platform works, the way managed cloud works, is that you're enabling the different workloads. And managed cloud is ideal for not just your enterprise late adopters, but also some of the early adopters are starting to look at managed cloud because they jumped in feet first when cloud came along, and they built a sustainable business using the second model of infrastructure as a service componentry. But then you hit a scale or a complexity or both. You hit a wall there, and you find that the self-service, self-managed model doesn't work for a couple of reasons, but the main reason is that you end up having to make some hard choices then. Do you hire more IT people, or do you hire more developers? Do you hire more sales? Do you hire more marketing people? Or in the case of a lot of startup companies, do you hire some finance people because you might have an IPO or an M&A in your future? So do you want to put your resources there, or more people to manage the componentry and the infrastructure? And another point to make about the managed cloud or the laundry service approach to IT is that both early adopters and enterprises can get into the situation where there are all kinds of unknown unknowns out there that are clouding your business strategy. And hopefully, if you're facing unknown unknowns in your business, like they're resolvable solutions, not imaginary weapons in Iraq, to take the unknown unknown analogy a little bit further. And then there's the whole idea of being able to focus on business outcomes. When you have your foundational infrastructure being managed or co-managed, then you have more space, more time, more brain power devoted to the things that really matter to the business. And I call managed cloud a new approach to an old problem. Back in the day, we used to call this outsourcing, and I think managed cloud actually takes that whole idea of outsourcing and does something more interesting with it. That there's the idea that you co-manage with your service provider, and you get a lot of extra things beyond just the infrastructure management. There's the whole idea of day-to-day operational support, of course, but then there's some of the day zero deployment kinds of things that come with managed hosting, as opposed to having to be your own systems integrator. And then I think one of the most important things here is that you move beyond this one-size-fits-all approach to infrastructure, that if you just want to buy infrastructure and you've got the people to manage and program it, that's great. But we're moving into the mass adoption stage of cloud right now, and there are only so many cloud experts to go around, and not every enterprise is going to be able to hire and hold on to those people. And for that reason, managed cloud is a great approach to things, and it gives you permission to outsource. There's this idea in tech that you're not a bona fide tech company unless you do everything yourself. If you have to bring in some experts, then, what are you doing there? But in the digital economy, you're not selling technology. You're selling an app. You're selling an experience. You're selling a new way of consuming a product. The infrastructure is there because it has to be, but a service provider can help you innovate on that infrastructure as well. And here's a slide that I typically use when I'm presenting to audiences of enterprise IT folks who need to kind of move into the next stage of what an IT department is there to do. And I think it's also applicable to companies who are maybe looking at this idea of using managed cloud. And managed cloud, in some ways, can help solve a business problem that exists in a lot of organizations these days where IT is over here, business is over here, and the two don't talk, they don't collaborate, they rarely see eye to eye on anything. And managed cloud, in a lot of ways, is a bridge to business because a lot of the firefighting and keeping the lights on aspects of IT, those can actually be outsourced. And leaving the IT department free to support innovation. And I think in IT these days, I think the biggest problem people have is that IT always says no. Anytime you need something, IT says can't be done, like no, we don't have enough time. But with a managed cloud approach, it allows IT to say yes, that they can be more proactive, they can help the business build a better toolbox to get that foundational piece down so that you can move to the innovation stage of building new applications on top of that cloud foundation. And overall, what I see as next generation cloud, it is this combination of managed infrastructure and managed operations. It's not so much taking bits and pieces and building an infrastructure with those, but at the same time being able to use a managed cloud approach to innovate, to tinker, to move things around as needed. So the cloud is more than just about infrastructure. I mean, of course, infrastructure is part of it, but I think one of the things that we need to get past in this industry is this whole idea of, this big battle for the cloud and, who's winning, who's losing. There are going to be a bunch of different clouds. There's a cloud for the tinkerers, and there's a cloud for the more cloud business platform oriented folks. So Rackspace, AWS, a lot of other companies, they are going to have to coexist peaceably, and that's definitely going to happen. And another thing about next generation cloud is that the cloud mechanics are a lot more important than the infrastructure these days. So there's a lot that goes into using cloud infrastructure. And as we heard from Tinder, that one thing they came to Rackspace for was one aspect of that cloud mechanics and how do you do the cloud mechanics at scale. And also, managed cloud is a great way for companies to get a head start on the digital economy, but it's also a good way for companies to take a step back and say, okay, we went this direction in the digital economy at first. Maybe we need a mid-course correction now, and let's get a service provider in to help us out with that. And then there's also the idea of here's a piece of the cloud that I don't want to deal with, or I don't know the latest and greatest of the technology involved with that, so let's get a service provider to help us out with that. So at the end of the day, it's all about what do you want to spend your time doing, programming your infrastructure or transforming your business. And I often end presentations these days with a quote. That's going to come up soon. There we go. Winston Churchill is always a great source for quotes. And I think that, right now we're at the end of the beginning of cloud. That a lot of the battles have been fought. The people who are resisting cloud, hopefully have found other jobs outside of tech right now. And now we're about to get down to, all right, what do we do with cloud? how do we use it to push the ball forward in our own business? And the end of the beginning, I think, is going to mean a lot of different models for cloud consumption. It'll be DIY, it'll be self-service, it'll be in-house, it'll be off-premise. But one IDC stat I wanted to leave you with is that right now, of all the companies using cloud, 31% of them are using some kind of external provider for their cloud infrastructure. In just like a year and a half from now, that number is going to go up to 41%. So, and as the years go on, we're going to see more and more infrastructure move off-site and into service providers. And I think that movement is one of the sure signposts that it is the end of the beginning. With that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Ian.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the insights from IDC. I know for me, I'd love to have the managed cloud laundry service. That looked really appealing. We're down to our last solution discussion of the main session before we go to